Dazod 500 presents Ontarian Elections of History. The second election in Ontarian history was on the 21st of March, 1871. Conservative leader and incumbent Premier John Sandfield Macdonald was not seen as neither too popular nor too unpopular, but he did have a couple of successes. He created an act modeled on the U.S. Homestead Act, which provided virtually free land for homesteaders on surveyed Crown lands. He created the District of Muskoka to create aid in the colonization effort, and he centered education aid to the University of Toronto at the expense of the denominational colleges. There were two major electoral reforms that happened between the last election and this election. Earlier in 1871, the Legislative Assembly passed an act to give the courts jurisdiction to rule on petitions dealing with corrupt practices in elections. And in 1872, the Parliament of Canada passed an act to compel MPs who were also members of a provincial legislature to resign such seats if they wished to stand again in a federal election. 5 MLAs in the 1871 election were thus obliged to leave the Legislative Assembly in order to stand in federal ridings in 1872. With that said, we can move on to the results of this election. There were 82 seats in the Legislative Assembly, and 42 seats were needed for a majority. The winner of this election got 43 seats, and since this election was a really long time ago, there is no other results. So, the winner got a majority of these seats. However, we don't know if he won a majority of the popular vote. The winner of this election by seat share would be Edward Blake of the Liberal Party, with John Sandfield Macdonald's government legally toppling as he goes down to 38 seats. However, the results of this election were so weird that it was inconclusive. So John Sandfield Macdonald, in ill health, technically was still the premier until they can find out what really happened. However, he resigned in December of 1871 after realizing that he didn't have much of a shot of ruling a fair majority. So Edward Blake stepped in December 1871 and ruled the province. Remember how I said that 5 MLAs had to step down to run in the federal election in 1872? Well, one of them was Edward Blake, and actually he was running against John A. Macdonald for Prime Minister of Canada. So, who would become the premier? Well, they ended up deciding that Sir Oliver Mowat would be the right choice, and he led the Liberal Party and the province of Ontario until the next election, which I'll see you for, in 1875.